Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 1883 in the name of Angela Constance on Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill at stage 3. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Angela Constance to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, up to 7 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, the core of the Victims, Witness and Justice Reform Scotland Bill is about supporting victims, and I want to begin by recognising everyone who has been impacted by the matters it seeks to address. Victims, witnesses and survivors, families, campaigners and support organisations. Many of you have shared your own lived experience to help shape the bill, and I know how painful that was, and I am grateful for your courage. Presiding Officer, let me speak directly to those people today, whether watching online or joining us in the gallery, as I know some are. You have campaigned for many years for many of the reforms in this bill, which Parliament will vote on tonight. Whilst it will not lessen the pain you have gone through, I hope you will feel a sense of pride and achievement with the changes you have brought about. Presiding Officer, let me also thank the committees that considered the bill, particularly the members of the Criminal Justice Committee, past and present, and their clerks, and the wide range of individuals and organisations who brought significant legal and academic expertise through their engagement with the committee and with the government. I am also grateful to all of those involved in major pieces of work that informed the bill: the Victims Task Force, the Lady Dorian Review, the large-scale jury research, the Victim Notification Scheme Review and the NHS Education Services Trauma Workstream and the Emma Rich Clinic. I also thank my officials in private office for their considerable support and patience throughout the bill's passage. It's fair to say this journey has been a marathon, not a sprint. Presiding Officer, this is a large and ambitious bill with the scope to make fundamental and meaningful changes, ensuring a justice system that meets the needs of sexual offence survivors, the majority of whom are women and girls. A justice system where victims are treated with compassion and their voices heard, where processes are modern, fair and transparent, and the rights of the accused continue to be protected, where there is a strong public confidence in justice outcomes, and which will better protect vulnerable parties and witnesses in civil cases. That is what Parliament has the opportunity to support tonight. This bill is a landmark bill of reforms, and I wanted to ensure that I worked collaboratively across the chamber to reach a consensus wherever possible. And I want everyone to be in a position to back the bill today. It is time to come together. I listened to concerns about piloting single-judge rape trials and took the decision not to pursue this, instead bringing forward amendments to enable further research on jury deliberations to help us better understand the impact of rape myths on decision-making. And if Parliament agrees to this bill, I will seek approval from the Lord President to commission this as a priority. Changes made to the bill also reflect the determination to work constructively with MSPs, and I have worked and engaged with all parties, as was seen during Stage 2 and last night's Stage 3. And many MSPs have changed this bill for the better, and I thank each and every one of them. Presiding Officer, I know that cultural changes and new laws this Parliament has introduced means women feel more able to report sexual offences. However, it pains me that so many have to even face the challenges that brings. It is abhorrent that so many women and girls are victims of sexual crime, and whilst I believe that laws and culture can help protect women, we need men to address their abusive behaviour and the attitudes underpinning it, part of the prevention work we carry out through our Equally Safe strategy. The reforms in the bill will implement a trauma-informed justice system. and introduce lifelong anonymity and independent legal representation, which will afford greater protection to sexual offence survivors. And I cannot stress enough how essential the creation of a new National Sexual Offences Court will be for improving survivors' experience. Lady Dorian, the Lord Advocate, senior members of the Judiciary, the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service, victims and support organisations have all been clear that this standalone specialist court can deliver further improvements in culture, process and practice that will benefit many. MSPs supporting the bill today should be proud of the part that they have played in creating this court. A court we may wish was not needed, but it will benefit so many. And for victims generally, the Victims and Witness Commissioner will have a significant role to play, ensuring the interests of victims are central to the operation of the justice system. Presiding Officer, I am pleased that there has been cross-party support for the abolition of the not proven verdict from manifesto commitments of several parties to supporting the bill today to bring that change about. There is much to be proud of in our justice system, and there have been many recent positive changes. This bill builds on that with reforms that can create the structural, procedural and cultural shifts required to make improvements for victims, witnesses and survivors. Where we are today has been reached by listening to many voices in advance of and during the passage of the bill. Parliament must demonstrate that it is listening to and is serious about putting victims and witnesses at the heart of our justice system. Presiding Officer, let me conclude by once again quoting Lady Dorian, who explained why reforms in the bill should be supported. If we do not seize the opportunity to create the cultural change from the ground up, there is every risk that in 40 years my successor and your successors will be in this room having the same conversation. Presiding Officer, I move that Parliament agrees the Victims, Witness and Justice Reform Scotland Bill and that it be passed.
Thank you. I now call Liam Kerr up to 6 minutes. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This bill has had a tortuous passage, a marathon, not a sprint, says the Cabinet Secretary, and that's certainly true. It was originally introduced in April 2023 as the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, and it didn't reach stage 1 until a year later. Since then, it's been through repeated rounds of evidence-taking, fundamental amendments, extensive stages 2 and 3, the introduction of novel and unscrutinised amendments at stage 3, and even the government amending its own draft, only to realise its error and reversing course again. At one point, it even changed its name, becoming the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill. Now, on Sunday, the Cabinet Secretary said, this bill should modernise our criminal justice system in the most radical ways, putting victims right at the very heart of everything. She's absolutely right. It should. But it does not. Now, to be fair, there are some welcome measures. Thanks to Russell Finlay, victims will have greater access to notifications about the outcomes of plea deals. Sharon Dowie, Pam Gossel have strengthened victims' protections through non-harassment orders. The bill also includes improved rights to information for victims of crime and better recognition of child victims and witnesses. These are steps in the right direction. But the bill misses so many chances to do so much more. It could have launched an inquiry into grooming gangs in Scotland to uncover the scale of the problem and prevent further victims of this vile crime. But it does not. It could have extended the parole period from 2 years to 3, giving victims both peace of mind and a respite from the revolving door of parole hearings. But it does not. It could have introduced a genuine Suzanne's Law, no body, no release. But it does not. And instead, Presiding Officer, the headline reforms are deeply flawed. The so-called Specialist Sexual Offences Court has been described as little more than a sign on a door. Simon de Rollo Casey has called it window dressing. It will use the same judges in the same buildings with the same overstretched staff and potentially add to the existing backlog. Rape survivors have deep concerns about what their cases not being heard in the High Court will mean. Ellie Wilson told the Justice Committee, Rape is one of the most serious crimes in Scots law. Such cases are only ever heard in the High Court. That solemnity is sacred, and it is important that we maintain it. It will cost millions that could instead have been invested in trauma-informed practice in our existing courts and in tackling that backlog that leaves rape victims waiting up to 3 years for justice. The Law Society, of which I remind the Chamber I'm a member, warns it will increase complexity, noting that specialist divisions could achieve the same thing. And Children First have said it could distract from the clear, practical changes that victims and witnesses consistently tell us would make things better. Presiding Officer, the bill also establishes a Victims Commissioner, an idea England adopted over 20 years ago. But this Commissioner will have no power to intervene in individual cases. It cannot investigate grooming gangs. It cannot address the crisis in legal aid or indeed the court backlog, which is why it's unsurprising that Scottish Women's Aid have said, we maintain our opposition to the creation of this Commissioner. This will add a layer of bureaucracy. Funds could be better utilised, improving services and advice to victims. And then we come to the changes to the trial system itself. The Cabinet Secretary candidly admitted and raised that the government originally proposed juryless rape trials, abandoned only after overwhelming expert opposition, threats of legal boycotts and warnings that it would lead to miscarriages of justice. But as the Cabinet Secretary noted, the Conservative manifesto did commit to abolish the not proven verdict. And that could have been done simply and effectively. But instead, the government has decided to go much further with changes that strike at the heart of the Scottish criminal justice system. You see, as well as changing the verdicts in the context of the Lord Advocate's corroboration changes, a system consistently featuring since at least the 1600s, they've also changed the size of the jury majority following a back and forth around its size. Presiding Officer, if we are going to change a system that has worked for over 200 years, we need a strong basis to found upon. This government has not got it. 3 of the 4 key features of our criminal trial system will be altered, largely without evidence, largely without precedent, and against expert advice. We have all received the warnings that this rebuilt system could be counterproductive. It could reduce conviction rates. It could lead to more miscarriages of justice and even worse outcomes for victims. The Law Society has been clear. We are concerned that the model proposed has never been proved effective in any other comparable jurisdiction. The lack of evidence to support the proposals may lead to unintended consequences in the fairness of criminal trials. Presiding Officer, this bill is entitled the Victims and Witnesses Bill. It does do some good things, but it fails to do what it could have, and it makes changes that may well fail and could even be counterproductive. It is a victims' bill in name only and represents a massively missed opportunity to truly put victims at the heart of justice. What we have here is neither for victims nor for witnesses, and that is why we will vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Polly McNeill up to 5 minutes. Ms McNeill.
This has been the most difficult bill that I've ever dealt with in the Criminal Justice Committee because in its entirety it deals with whole-scale reform of the criminal justice system, overturning years of established systems that fit together. So it's not simple to pick apart. There's been considerable focus on the systems and actually at the early stages not on victims. Abolishing the not proven verdict at the beginning, the bill contained abolishing the jury system for some trials. There's a lot to deal with in this bill, but there isn't the kind of consensus for some of the big legal principles, such as the size of the jury, following the removal of the not proven verdict. There are many big issues that arrived at stage 2 and stage 3 that were not properly scrutinised. I was not comfortable with this, and yesterday I did my best to follow all the late amendments, but I have to be honest and say that I didn't understand all of what was trying to be achieved, and that's because there simply was not enough time, and I don't think that's satisfactory. The debate on the jury size and the balance for convictions within the jury has not achieved the kind of positive consensus when you're making substantive change, and there is no way of knowing whether we have retained the same balance of interest on how this change will affect convictions. We'll just need to wait and see. A lot of what the bill tries to achieve, as I said yesterday, could be done without legislation. In fact, culture change, I would argue, has already started. There's a strong consensus that the experience of victims of sexual assault has not been good enough, and there's been an imperative, as the Cabinet Secretary has said, because we need a fundamental change in society towards women and girls. And we know that 2/3 of the crimes in the High Court are now sexual offences. And I actually believe that the leadership of the Government, the Lord Advocate and the Judiciary and victim support and rape crisis have paved the way for some of the changes that are already happening, tackling jury myths, evidence by commission, the law corroboration has been changed, and the extended use of the Murav Doctrine are already things that are beginning to change the culture, and hopefully for the better. Trauma-informed practice should be standard practice and can be embedded in any court. Scottish Labour welcome independent legal representation, but we would have liked to have gone further on that. And we note changes to the victim notification scheme, which are good, and communicating with victims. But the real test will be whether this bill, in fact, will be the transformative change for victims that the Government promises. But a lot of what we've heard so far is the Government asking us to trust that we've got it right, but we don't have any evidence that they do. Because if victims are to be given more agency and engagement, for example, with the Crown, as we've heard, they are far more likely to feel they've had a positive experience. And I believe, and I've argued, victims must have the right to meet their advocate in advance of a trial to give them the agency they deserve. And one of the most traumatising things for victims is the delay. It's the thing that comes up all the time, and this is at the heart of what I think the argument is. Well, we haven't heard promises of extra resources for the court system, but unless you fix the shortages of defence lawyers and make sure there are enough people to staff any new court or the existing court system, this bill will not adequately address the problems of delay. The Scottish Government are saying that structural change is the answer, but as I've said, I'm concerned that this legislation will not deliver the promises that it claims. The Sexual Offences Court is certainly the flagship of the bill, a new court insofar as it will have natural jurisdiction over solemn cases. But I agree with Liam Kerr on this. It's a sign over the door. And there's a lot of organisational change. We're not clear that it will result in any difference in a reduction in the delay that victims experience. It's a very large claim to make. And I have a real worry about that, a genuine worry that the delay will not... I did suggest an alternative way, and I wholeheartedly believe that having a specialist division in the High Court for victims of sexual assault, and similarly in the Sheriff Court, would have been I think a better and practical way of achieving the same thing. And I also want to put on record that I personally agree with Ellie Wilson on this. Fundamentally, I am not in favour of taking rape out of the High Court. You may disagree with that, but I believe it's one of the most heinous crimes. We know it because it's a plea to the Crown. That's why it is. And I think we can embed the kind of practices that without the legislation, it's quite clear. For these reasons, Presiding Officer, Scottish Labour will not be voting with the Government tonight. We'll be voting against the bill.
Thank you. I now call Maggie Chapman up to 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I remind colleagues of my register of interests. I used to work for a rape crisis centre. We are here today to debate legislation that has the potential to transform how Scotland's justice system treats those who have been harmed, particularly survivors of rape, sexual assault and other serious offences. For too long, survivors have been asked to carry the heaviest burden, to repeat and relive their trauma in a system that was not designed with them in mind. The Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill gives us a chance to shift that balance. It's not just about small adjustments. It's about moving from a system centred on procedure to one centred on people, on those who have been harmed, on those asked to give evidence, and on those who need the system to work fairly for them. The foundations of this bill are the recommendations of Lady Dorrian's review. That work was clear. Sexual offence cases are failing survivors, failing to protect dignity and failing to deliver consistent justice. The provisions on specialist courts, on trauma-informed judicial duties and on measures to reduce delay and re-traumatisation all stem from her recommendations. The Lord Advocate, too, has been clear that reform is necessary if prosecution is to be both effective and fair. Third sector organisations have been vital in shaping this bill. Rape Crisis Scotland has reminded us that survivors experience the justice system not just as discrete hearings, but as one long ordeal. Victim Support Scotland has called this legislation a landmark chance to embed trauma-informed practice and transparency. They and others have told us that the bill must shorten that ordeal, reduce re-traumatisation and make support an active offer at every stage. And I'm very grateful for all of their contributions. I welcome many provisions of the bill: the statutory duty to act in a trauma-informed way, stronger protections for complainants' anonymity, reforms to the victim notification scheme, the right to independent legal representation to oppose intrusive questioning on sexual history, the establishment of a sexual offences court, and the abolition of the not proven verdict. These are practical, evidence-based steps. They reflect the principle that survivors must be treated with dignity. But let's be clear, Scottish Greens believe this bill should have gone further. Survivors need support from the moment they report, not weeks later. That means properly resourced referral pathways so survivors know what support they can access, whether rape crisis services, victim support services, legal advice or something else. It means embedding consistency across the country, so a survivor in Shetland is offered the same level of support as someone in Glasgow. And that support must be throughout the legal process and beyond. That's why I brought the amendments at stage 2 that I did, to extend advocacy, legal advice and legal representation available. We also need to be honest about resources. Legal reform without investment in specialist services risks leaving survivors with rights on paper, but not in practice. A trauma-informed duty for judges must be matched by training, by court scheduling that avoids last-minute cancellations, and by proper facilities in every sheriffdom. And we must remain ambitious. Lady Dorrian's work showed us that specialist sexual offence courts are possible and necessary, but we must also ensure that they are resourced, staffed with trained judiciary and rolled out with urgency. Reforming our justice system is not optional. Survivors have waited too long for change. This bill is a start, but we must not pretend it is the end of that journey. The Scottish Greens support this bill, and we will continue to push for a justice system that is preventative, trauma-informed and truly centred on those who have been harmed. Let us all commit today to legislation that makes a real difference. Let us choose compassion, dignity and justice for survivors. Thank you.
I now call Jamie Green again, up to 4 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, I'm often asked when schools come to visit, what is the best part of being an MSP? Is it helping constituents? Is it meeting inspiring people? Is it changing the law? Well, today I say all three be true, because every one of the 160 amendments that we debated yesterday have real-world consequences. The removal of the centuries-old not proven verdict, the Victims Commissioner and other sweeping changes to our justice system, the likes of which this Parliament has not seen since its very creation. In my case, the introduction of Suzanne's Law, which commands the confidence of those to whom it matters most, to me. The introduction of Michelle's Law, changes to parole decisions and the rules around that, giving victims a greater voice in court, giving them more information, not less. Now look, I joined the Justice Committee back in 2021 when I was then Shadow Justice Secretary. And week in, week out, we took evidence from ministers, from lawyers and academics. But do you know what sticks in my mind the most about that period is the evidence sessions we took in private. The horrific stories of abuse and assault and rape and murder. Now, I first consulted on my own Members' Bill back in 2021 because with so many wrongs to right, I understood the gravity of the task in hand. the lack of victims' voices and the endless traumatisation in the justice system. And I was simply appalled at what I heard, to be honest. But it is incredibly difficult to get a Members' Bill through this place. So, for me, perhaps serendipitously, the Scottish Government launched its own Criminal Justice Reform Bill. But the Government soon realised that the word victim needed to be at the front of that bill, as it did in mine, and so it changed. Of course, they say imitation is the best form of flattery, but I don't really care, because what matters to me is how do I get these proposals onto the face of law by whichever means possible. And yesterday, Presiding Officer, we did just that. We did that. Victims in all solemn cases can now make an impact statement to court. They must be informed of a decision not to prosecute a case. They will have their safety and security put front and centre of parole decisions. They will have exclusion zones if required or necessary. They will be given reasons for these decisions. They will be guided through their justice journey, and they will know that if the killer of their loved one refuses to cooperate, then that person will stay behind bars. Every political party represented in this Parliament, to some degree or another, supported these changes and voted for them. Constructive, respectful negotiations, because that is how you get things done from the opposition benches in this place. I'm grateful to members, the ones that backed my proposals, but I am more grateful to those who let me sat in their living room with a mug and tea in hand whilst they recounted the absolute horror of the crimes that they and their loved ones had been victims of. And I say to those in the gallery here today who live and breathe that trauma every day, it is to them we owe the most credit to get to where we are today, because it is your relentless campaigning to put victims first that I believe has finally paid off. Now, I made them a promise, face to face, that I would fight to change the law in their favour, and I sincerely hope I will have met their expectations today. Now, I also believe that there are members in this Parliament who will never have voted for this bill, whatever its content. But I would say to them, if you vote against this bill, you're voting against your own manifesto commitments. If you vote against this bill, you're voting against every positive change we made yesterday, and you're ignoring the pleas from those whose voices matter most, victims themselves. Now, 2 members of those families sent me a quote they want me to read, and it simply says this: "We implore you to vote through this bill for this and all the positive changes it can bring." And I say to them, I know when I next meet them, I will look them in the eye and say, I did. So, members, if you don't listen to me, listen to them, to whom this bill's passing matters most. Please.
Thank you. We now move to the open debate. I call first Audrey Nicholl, then Douglas Ross. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So it's safe to say the passage of the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill has been long, complex and challenging, and rightly so, given the transformational ambition of the bill deriving from the Lady Dorian review, and that centres on delivering meaningful change for victims and witnesses in the justice system. And I too thank everyone who contributed to the shape of the bill as it stands with us here today at Stage 3. So the extensive debates at all stages reflected the breadth of the bill, but also our collective desire to shift the dial on the common but often justified perception that the system fails to adequately support those it is meant to protect. And I quote the words of a survivor who gave powerful evidence to the Criminal Justice Committee at Stage 1. She said, "When we talk about what happened, each one of us mentions the exact date that our case went to trial. We remember the date that we were raped. We also remember the date that we went to trial, because they are as traumatic as each other." So, speaking as a member, not convener, of the Criminal Justice Committee, but also through the lens of a career in policing, for me, the bill presents a huge opportunity for us to create a contemporary and modern justice system that we can be proud of. Now, there's not enough time to comment on all the provisions proposed in the bill, so I want to reflect on a couple of the provisions. Firstly, the removal of the not proven verdict and the establishment of a specialist sexual offences court. But first, though, I want to thank everyone, including campaigners and colleagues, for their efforts in making the case for free court transcripts. And I hope that this proves to be a small but meaningful option for survivors as they move on from their experience of sexual crime. So, turning to the not proven verdict, there is no doubt that this verdict has had its day and should be abolished. During scrutiny, some argued that the not proven verdict is a unique and historical feature of the Scottish legal system and it should be retained. But that is hardly a good reason to keep this verdict. Indeed, the Criminal Justice Committee heard compelling evidence about the devastating impact that the verdict, which cannot be defined, can have on victims, and even for the accused, it can be an unsatisfactory outcome which leaves a lingering stigma. So, turning to the creation of the Specialist Sexual Offences Court, a key reform in the bill and informed by survivors and their families and many others. So this proposal is supported by victims, stakeholders and leading members of the justice system, and it provides a real opportunity to reform practice, process and culture, improving efficiency and effectiveness, reducing the number and frequency of unnecessary court adjournments and ensuring that cases reach trial more quickly. The status quo is simply not an option, and I agree with the Cabinet Secretary's view that creating specialist divisions of the High Court and Sheriff Courts, and I quote, prioritises hierarchies, status and tradition over progressive and practical solutions that will improve the experience of complainers in sexual offences cases. So there is so much more to say. However, to conclude, we have seen some meaningful change over decades in culture, legislation and attitudes, but we need to do so much more. I urge members to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Douglas Ross to be followed by Christine Graham. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I remind the Chamber of my register of interest, my wife is a sergeant with Police Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary knows she has the numbers. She has worked hard with some parties to get this over the line, and I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week we knew the Greens were going to support it before we discussed the 160 amendments that Jamie Green alluded to earlier. So this bill will pass. But I can't help feel, having sat through yesterday's Stage 3 amendments, having looked at the work done by the Justice Committee, that this is a missed opportunity. Because I think there was an opportunity here for the Cabinet Secretary not just to have a majority in favour of this bill, but a unanimous decision of this Parliament to support a bill that really made a difference for victims and witnesses. We all want to see an improvement for anyone who goes through the horrific and horrendous experience of being a victim of crime, some of the most serious crimes we can ever imagine. We all want to make it better for people to be involved in the justice system, to be a witness, to give evidence. And I personally think it's sometimes some of the most harrowing cases I've ever had to deal with as a constituency representative, is those who have gone into the legal system, either as a victim or as a witness, and have come out of it almost more traumatised by that experience than the crime itself. So I do think there was an opportunity here with this bill to make a difference that all of us could get behind and support. And I gently say to Jamie Green, and I don't think he was absolutely doing this, but I don't think you can shame opposition members for opposing this bill because there are good elements within it. There are undoubtedly elements within this bill that I personally support. I know there are families in the chamber that would like MSPs to all back it because of the individual elements that they have rightly and fiercely campaigned on for so long. But that doesn't mean we can ignore the elements of the bill that I believe could have been improved if the Justice Secretary had just gone a bit further yesterday in the Stage 3 amendments or at Stage 2. As Liam Kerr says, the Conservatives have made this bill better, I think, with the amendments from Russell Finlay, from Sharon Dowie and from Pam Gossel. But I still can't understand and get my head around an opportunity in this bill to launch a national inquiry into grooming gangs, something that we see all over the news, all over the media, something that the Labour government at Westminster originally tried to do the same and refused, but had to eventually U-turn because of public pressure. I'm pretty sure in a number of weeks, months or maybe years, and sadly if it gets to years it will be far too late, that an incumbent Scottish Government will have to do the same. Why not take the opportunity in this bill? And I have to say on sexual offences courts, and this is the amendment I spoke to yesterday, I understand there is disagreements on this, some believing that this is the right approach and some believing it would be the wrong approach. And I have to say the Cabinet Secretary's response to proposals put to her were dismissive of an alternative. She believes her option is the only option, but as Pauline McNeill said yesterday, that is not the case. This is a proposal that is going to cost a lot of money. Money, I think, could be better spent in the current justice system with changes. And I understand Lady Dorian doesn't agree with specialised units or divisions within the High Court. But Lady Dorian also doesn't agree with the approach the Government have now taken forward on the Sexual Offences Court. So I do believe that is another missed opportunity. I would genuinely have been pleased to be able to vote for the Victims and Witnesses Bill today. But I can't, and it's with a heavy heart that I can't, because I think it could have been so much better. It could have done so much more for the victims and witnesses across Scotland, and I sadly believe it's a missed opportunity. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Ross. And I call the final speaker in the open debate, Christine Graham, briefly.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I congratulate all engaged in this bill, but I also consider that to allocate just over 1 hour to debate these radical changes to the delivery and pursuit of our criminal law is misplaced. I shall make just a few remarks. Steps to better steer witnesses with compassion through the court's process must be welcomed. I am not convinced of the need for specialist sexual offences courts. I pose this question. An individual is indicted for robbery, assault with a threat to life and sexual assault. 3 different victims. In which court should this be held? The majority in size of juries seems to me untried. The removal of the not proven verdict may make convictions more difficult, whether before a sheriff sitting alone or before a jury. The test applicable across summary and solemn proceedings is still that the Crown has to prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. The onus is on the Crown. Not proven meant there was still a reasonable doubt, and now that transfers seamlessly to not guilty considerations. I think some campaigning organisations may believe this makes convictions together with jury size more likely, and I do understand why. But in my view, it will not, and at best, it may be neutral. So as the not proven verdict is consigned to history, I have marked down my reservations, and I sincerely hope my concerns about unintended consequences do not come to pass. And despite those concerns and reservations, I will support the bill at decision time, but I will watch how it works in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. We now go to the closing speeches, and I call first Maggie Chapman, up to 4 minutes. Ms Chapman.
Thank you. We are treated like outsiders throughout the whole process. I was told by a police detective that I wasn't raped, it was consensual. When you are on the witness stand, you should not be made to feel embarrassed, humiliated, undermined by someone. In our court system, you are totally humiliated. It was the most degrading experience I have been through. You are made to feel as if you're a bit of evidence that just gets put on the shelf and is brought out when you're needed, and you're just disregarded afterwards. Presiding Officer, as we close this debate, I return to the people at the heart of it. Those who have survived sexual violence, those who have stood as witnesses in court, those who have too often been re-victimised by the very system meant to protect them. Their words should be in our minds this afternoon. We have heard throughout this process the evidence from Lady Dorian's review, from the Lord Advocate and from those on the front line of support, Rape Crisis Scotland, Victim Support Scotland, Scottish Women's Aid and so many others. Their message has been consistent. Our current system is not working well. Survivors face long delays, hostile environments and re-traumatising procedures. Change is not just desirable, it is imperative. This bill is a step toward that change. The statutory duty of trauma-informed practice, the new protections for complainers, reforms to victim notification, the introduction of independent legal representation are all important and welcome. They are measures that survivors themselves have called for over and over again, and measures that can rebuild confidence in the justice system. But we must also be honest about where we are falling short, as others have said. The Greens have been clear we need stronger guarantees of early and consistent support for all survivors, not just the possibility of a referral, but the expectation of it. We need all survivors to have access to legal advice and representation for as long as they need it. We need our criminal and civil justice systems to be better connected, to talk to each other, to ensure women and children aren't used as pawns in someone else's game. We need the reforms we will deliver on paper today to translate into meaningful change in people's lives across our country. Because survivors deserve more than just symbolic progress. And we must also guard against complacency. Passing this bill is not the end of the journey. Trauma-informed practice is not achieved by statute alone. It must be embedded in training, in scheduling, in the culture of our courts. The Lord Advocate and Crown Office must play their part, ensuring decisions are explained clearly and respectfully, and that the pursuit of justice does not add to a survivor's pain. Yes, I will.
Christine Graham, briefly.
To do so, and I know your time is so constricted, but do you think there's a place here in our education system in schools to educate with regard to the general legal process and juries, what a jury is and is not?
Always through the chair, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, and I thank Christine Graham for that intervention. Absolutely, education for all of us about the legal system, our criminal justice system, all of our system is imperative for this. But we also know that as we pass this bill today and as we work on what it aims to achieve, our third sector partners will continue to hold us to account, and rightly so. Rape Crisis Scotland, Victim Support Scotland and others have stressed that survivors do not see the system as separate parts, but as one long process. We owe it to them, to the people they support, to keep going until our justice system is worthy of the name. For the Scottish Greens, this is about principle. Justice is not just about verdicts. It's about reducing harm, restoring dignity and preventing further violence. That is why we support this bill and why we will continue to press for more along these lines and others, for restorative approaches where appropriate, for prevention, for survivor-centred practice in every centre of the system. So let us pass this bill today, not as the end point, but as the beginning of a transformation in how Scotland delivers justice. Survivors deserve nothing less.
Thank you. I now call Katie Clark again, up to 4 minutes. Ms Clark.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to close this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour. We remain concerned that this bill may have unintended consequences and disappoint victims, and are also concerned at the significant amendments brought by the Scottish Government at Stage 3, for example, on victim notification and the Rape Shield, which were not considered by the committee. We are not opposed in principle to these proposals, but these are major changes which required consultation and scrutiny. Whilst much of what we proposed and argued for at Stage 2 on victim notification, such as a single point of contact, has been agreed and accepted by the Government, the amendments lodged by the Government at Stage 3 extend to many areas not scrutinised by the committee. As I say, there should have been consultation and scrutiny. We welcome that the Scottish Government did not proceed with the most polarising part of the original bill, non-jury rape trials. These were controversial, and we do not believe were the top demand of victims. Indeed, many of the rape survivors that we spoke to said that the jury was not an issue for them. It is unclear how the changes on jury size, jury majority and the impact that the abolition of the not proven verdict will have on conviction rates. One of the most significant complaints from complainers, however, was the delay they experience in the system. And we are concerned that the unintended consequence of this bill could be to cause further delays with the massive reorganisation required to create new courts. Even if extra resource is put into the new courts, this will leave less resource for the High and Sheriff Courts, who may continue to deal with many rape and sexual offence cases. We would have been more supportive if the proposals had been more radical, with new buildings and infrastructure, so that a very different environment was being created. The reality, however, is these new courts will use the same buildings and the same rooms, and the complainer is likely to be walking into a very similar setup with new signage. We support radical cultural change and embedding trauma-informed practice throughout the system for victims and witnesses. We believe that the experience of other countries is that one of the most effective ways of delivering justice for victims is by empowering them within the system. And yesterday I spoke about some of the international examples of where victims have been given stronger voices and more access to information. We believe that by giving, I think Rona Mackay is attempting, I'm happy to take an intervention.
Rona Mackay, briefly.
Thank the member for taking the intervention. Does the member not think that by her party, and the Conservative Party, not voting for this bill, you are letting down victims and witnesses? Despite all the good things that are in this bill, you're prepared to not vote for it?
I think the whole of my speech addresses. I think the whole of my speech addresses the point that Rona Mackay is making, that there are many proposals in this bill that we do agree with. Indeed, many of them don't actually require legislation. For example, if you look at part 1 of the bill, the proposals around trauma-informed practices, as I've said, that's something we strongly support. That should be happening already, and government needs to be driving those policies. We strongly support that, but we don't need this bill to do that. And we think that warm words isn't what's needed today, but the kind of very real action that will improve the experiences of victims and witnesses within the system. And our view is that giving access to information, independent legal advice and representation, and enabling their voices to be heard within the system is probably one of the most powerful steps that could be taken. I don't know if I've to time, Presiding Officer, because I took an intervention. So we welcome the very narrow provisions on independent legal representation in relation to access to medical records. But we believe that far more needs to be done. This bill was far too large, and the committee attempted to give equal scrutiny to different parts of the bill, but inevitably much of the scrutiny focused on proposals which have now been removed from the bill, and too many parts of this bill received little or no scrutiny and were added late. So unfortunately, on this occasion, we're unable to support the government.
Thank you, Ms Clark. And I call Sharon Dowie. Up to 5 minutes, Ms Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to start by acknowledging that the bill does contain some improvements, and I welcome that the Government backed my amendments to toughen up non-harassment orders and allow for a review to notify victims when fiscal fines are issued. However, taken together, this bill fails to deliver the meaningful changes to the criminal justice system that victims in Scotland are crying out for. Firstly, as Katie Clark just said, it was far too big. It should have been broken up long ago, but instead it's been made even bigger, with some significant changes introduced by the Government at the very last minute, without proper scrutiny, as Liam Kerr and Pauline McNeill made clear last night. But then we come to what the bill actually does. It creates a Victims Commissioner, and on paper this sounds wonderful. If we had limitless resources, then that would be one thing, but we do not. The truth is, it lacks teeth and has no ability to intervene in individual cases, providing false hope to victims that it could directly help them, while taking away resources that could instead be invested in victim support services, as Scottish Women's Aid have warned us. Yesterday, I tried to strengthen the role by giving the Commissioner the power to obtain information from local authorities and social housing providers, but it was voted down. This Parliament set up a cross-party committee to look into the role of commissioners, which concluded only a few months ago that creating new bodies to address public service failures or perceived public service failures isn't necessarily effective, and nor is it sustainable. Meanwhile, Children First have said that A commissioner should not be brought in as a substitute for concrete actions to improve the experiences of victims and witnesses, and I agree with them. Victims are being failed, but all we are doing here is creating yet another commissioner of debatable effectiveness and saying job well done without having changed much. I do admit that the Government have done a great job on the branding of the bill, because creating a new sexual offences court also sounds brilliant, but as Douglas Ross laid out yesterday, when you scratch the surface, you realise it's little more than an expensive sign on a door, in the same court buildings, with the same judges and the same staff. I welcome the requirement for training and trauma-informed practice, but I believe, as Pauline McNeill has outlined, that rather than setting up a whole new court and the huge expense that comes with it, we could instead create a specialist division in the existing courts and focus our resources there, where we know they are badly needed. The Faculty of Advocates and the Law Society have both said this would be more effective, while Children First said they feared creating a new court would distract from making the changes that victims and witnesses argue would make things better. Simon DeRollo KC even called it window dressing. Once again, we are patting ourselves on the back without having addressed the real issues. Then we come to changes in jury majorities. As Liam Kerr said, this was decided without any hard evidence, despite the liberty of our constituents literally being on the line, with the changes largely based on mock jury research that experts like Lord Ranucci KC warned do not in any way mirror what really happens in the courts. I tried to stop this by submitting an amendment that would put us in line with the tried and tested system in England and Wales and other jurisdictions, but it was defeated in favour of a step into the unknown. It's hard not to conclude that this bill does anything other than waste millions on cosmetic solutions that will make little difference to victims while ignoring the real issues. Victims deserve real change, but the bill does not deliver. What is most disappointing is what could have been. We urge the Government to accept our amendments that would have made fundamental changes and delivered a victims' bill worthy of the name. Russell Finlay tried to deliver a real Suzanne's Law with no body, no parole, and common sense reforms so that victims are not left in the dark regarding plea deals. Liam Kerr tried to deliver a Scottish grooming gangs inquiry. I tried to ensure victims were notified about decisions not to prosecute, but they were all voted down. As a result, this is a victims' bill in name only, and it's with a very heavy heart that I will be voting against it today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call on Angela Constance to wind up to 6 minutes, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I don't want to pollute today with partisan comments, because at the end of the day, victims will judge for themselves whether they see through any contortions or manufactured grievances. As parliamentarians, we have had our debates and we have had our disputes through Stage 1, Stage 2 and Stage 3, and I believe the bill is all the better for it. We've all had debates and amendments that we have won and lost at some point during this legislative process. But debate today is not about repeating or reheating or rehashing those old debates. Today is about putting our past battles behind us, because ultimately it's not about us. Presiding Officer, today is about the people gathered in the public gallery behind us, and about the many victims and survivors and victim support organisations, the length and breadth of this country. And I do want to, once again, Presiding Officer, thank everyone for their thoughtful consideration and engagement in the Victims' Witness and Justice Reform Bill, for their remarks this afternoon. And for the record, the bill was introduced with its current title. And can I also say to Jamie Green, I made a promise too the day that I introduced this bill that I would see it through and do everything that I could. And I do believe that this Parliament can be proud of the significant reforms that this bill will introduce that will support victims and witnesses in our justice system. And I would just like to remind Parliament of those. It will introduce a new champion for victims by establishing a Victims and Witness Commissioner that will have oversight of a Victims Charter, powers to require criminal justice bodies to respond, and if they don't, they'll have a route to the Court of Session, a Victims Commissioner with purpose and power to hold to account the implementation of trauma-informed approaches that will see the re-traumatisation of victims and supporting, not just now, and supporting victims and witnesses to give their best evidence, because that surely is in the interests of fairness. This bill will introduce radical improvements to how sexual offences are dealt with through the creation of a new sexual offences court, a court that will, in its establishment, compel change. And I just couldn't accept an alternative that only gave the power to courts and didn't see that through by compelling them to change. And of course, there's the abolition of not proven, a long debate that has ensured that the change will now happen, a change that's long overdue. And some of the evidence of the support to abolish not proven goes back decades, and indeed even to Michael McMahon's Members' Bill, which of course was unsuccessful at the time, but I think speaks to the value of Members' Bills irrespective of whether they complete their journey or not. And yes, there is reform in the Victim Notification Scheme to ensure victims can be supported, informed and ultimately empowered. And rape is the most serious offence, not because it is prosecuted in the higher court. It is because it is the most degrading crime that a woman can experience. Other improvements are around the parole process, including requiring the parole board to take into account whether a prisoner has information about the disposal of a victim's remains but has not disclosed it. Trauma-informed approaches embedded with a duty, a statutory duty on criminal justice bodies, protecting the privacy of victims through lifelong anonymity for sexual offence victims, new independent legal representation for victims where the court has been asked to look into a victim's character and sexual history, and strengthening protections for victims through reforms to non-harassment orders and other protective orders. Presiding Officer, that is the transformation that parliamentarians have the power to agree today by supporting the bill. And yes, indeed, it is a big bill, but as someone once said to me, you do as much as you can for as long as you can. And I know we are all attached to our tradition and our history, not least in our very unique legal system in Scotland, which of course we're all proud of and will do everything we can to safeguard. But as Lady Elise Angelini says, our justice system doesn't stand still due to tradition. The great thing about Scottish justice is that it does look at itself and it does move and it does develop. Presiding Officer, our justice system needs reforms so that those who become part of it, whether as victims or witnesses of crime, feel safe and informed and are treated with understanding. This bill is needed to ensure that the structural, procedural and cultural change that will put victims and witnesses at the heart of a much more modern and fair justice system is created. And, Presiding Officer, let me conclude by urging, even at this late stage, to urge appeal to all parliamentarians not to let victims, their family and their support organisations down today. They want to know that we have heard them and that we are giving them our full support to this bill. We need to let those who we seek to serve know that their pain has not been in vain and that we are with them in their creation of a legacy that comes from their loss. Presiding Officer, I do appeal that we come together and back this bill.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill at Stage 3. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Business Motion 18921 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme. And I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Liz Smith.
Thank you. Just for parliamentary transparency and in line with the letter that I received from the Minister for Children and Young People on the 4th of September, I wonder if I could have confirmation on the record for next week that there will be a ministerial statement on the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill, even if the Minister for Parliamentary Business can't actually confirm the time for that. And may I also put on the record, Presiding Officer, that I'm very grateful to the Minister for Children and Young People for arranging to meet with me tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. And I call on Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I agree with everything Liz Smith has just said. But I want to move the subject on slightly. You will know, Presiding Officer, I've tried numerous times this week to get a statement on Minister Jim Fairley's Seagull Summit, which is happening next Tuesday. Now, you have competing demands to deal with and have your own reasons for not selecting them, and I respect that. But I now have, through parliamentary procedures, an opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on this issue. And the reason I want to raise it is because what the Minister is now doing next Tuesday is a sham and a farce. He came to this chamber months ago and said this: "I will have a summit later this year to discuss with members and the people who are raising these issues." Well, the summit he plans to go ahead with next Tuesday is excluding members because politicians are not invited. It's excluding the public because it's not open to the public, and it's excluding the press as well. So a cast-iron commitment given in this Parliament for a meaningful summit is now turning into an SNP talking shop, and they'll be talking to themselves. Because what we're going to get is Jim Fairley sitting at Great Glen House, which is the headquarters of Nature Scot, listening to his officials, listening to himself and listening to Quango bosses, and not listening to the public in the north. I will give way in a moment. I'm glad the Minister's interested in this because the government haven't been so far, but not listening to the public who have been raising repeated concerns about this issue. Now, the point about the location is important because Fergus Ewing wrote to the Minister and asked for this to be held in a neutral venue. He suggested Eden Court. But Nature Scot said no, this must be held at Great Glen House so they could have the broadband connection to live stream the summit to a wider audience. This week, Nature Scot have said they are going to now refuse to live stream it. So the whole reason for having it at their own headquarters has now been thrown out. And on that point, I'll give way to the Minister.
I just wonder at what stage Mr Ross might speak to the business motion before us, Presiding Officer. And as an aside, I can say I've not had any request sent to me for a statement in this matter as a matter of public record. I think it's important to make that point.
I'll get there. In the next 3 minutes, I'll get there because we have up to 5 minutes. And the reason that there hadn't been a statement request is I was looking at other opportunities. I put in a topical question request. I put in an urgent question request yesterday. I put in an urgent question request today. They were not selected, so I'm now using the opportunity afforded to every MSP to speak for up to 5 minutes on a topic of their choice that they would like to see in the business motion going forward.
Just for clarity and for all members, this is an opportunity to speak to items that members wish to see in a future business programme.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want. And the reason I think it's important that we set out why this is an issue is that at the moment the SNP Minister is going to go ahead with something that doesn't meet any of the conditions that he himself said. It is not being independently chaired. It's been chaired by the Minister for a short period, then he's jumping into his ministerial car and heading down the road again. It's not been held in a neutral venue. It's been held in the headquarters of Nature Scot, who are the biggest bloc in this whole process, and it is not being made available and open to the public. The business improvement districts of both Nairn and Inverness were involved in trying to set this up and are now considering themselves whether they should even go to this event. So what I would like to see in this business motion is for the Scottish Government to postpone the summit on Tuesday and to make a statement to Parliament next week on the postponement and what they will do to make this a truly open and reflective summit where members of the public can give their views directly to the Minister. So he doesn't sit behind a closed door in Nature Scott and listen to people who agree with him or to people he agrees with. He listens to the public. I will briefly give way to Rachel Hamilton.
Rachel Hamilton.
Presiding officer, we have the same issues of seagulls attacking constituents in Eyemouth. I asked him fairly directly what would happen in terms of the representation of constituents in Eyemouth to the Seagull Summit, and he replied that he would share the recommendations from the Seagull Summit. I would absolutely 100% back my colleagues' recommendations to have a statement here in this Parliament, because this government is not listening to our constituents about the threats of seagulls in our constituencies.
In conclusion, Mr Ross.
And in conclusion, they're not listening to anyone who disagrees with them. We've been told that there's going to be a pest controller there next Tuesday to give an update. This is the same pest controller whose idea to control the gull numbers was to pick up eggs and chicks and take them to wildlife sanctuaries, but the same pest controller who said that wouldn't be possible to implement in the Highlands and Islands where this is being held. So can I plead to the Minister that the Government listen to the concerns of business improvement districts, politicians across the political spectrum and members of the public who would like to see this summit postponed next week and a truly open, transparent and listening summit rearranged in the future at a neutral venue open to the public, and we'll include that in the business next week.
I call on Jamie Hepburn to respond on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau.
Well, let me do what Mr Ross did not do and speak to the business motion before us. But as an aside, let me say the Tories have a new business manager. I can't say it speaks much for Mr Ross's confidence in him when he hasn't decided to go and speak to his business manager to raise this matter with me. I can hear the Conservatives decrying that. I have not had a single representation from the Conservative business manager on this issue. Had plenty of other issues, but not this issue. And if Mr Ross cares to go via his business manager, as is the normal practice, and he cares to raise this with me, I'll give it every consideration. Of course I'll give way to Mr Ross.
Well, I'm grateful to the Minister for giving me. First of all, the problem with asking for statements is we have asked for many and none of them come forward. We get them drip, drip, drip over weeks. This is an urgent issue, which is why I went through the process of a topical question and an urgent question. When that was not successful, the next opportunity for a member to raise this is through the business motion. So the Minister could satisfy us all by saying his government will postpone this summit, organise a proper summit that will listen to people and include that in the business statement next week.
Minister.
Well, he knows it's utter nonsense that we don't bring forward statements that have been requested. There was a statement requested on the situation. He cares to listen. I'm happy to spend on the situation at Alexander Dennis. And we brought that statement today. That statement was made at the request of the Conservative Party. So we do bring these things forward. And indeed, let me come to the matter at hand in relation to the business motion, because I do thank Liz Smith for actually speaking to the business motion. She makes the point that she's already raised the issue with the Minister for Children, Young People and the Promise around a statement on the matter that she raises. A commitment has been made by the Minister that there will be a statement. I have, and this speaks to the point. The Conservative business manager has in fact raised this issue with me. I've made clear to him that we will lodge a statement on this matter. I've made that point to all business managers, and indeed I've made that commitment to the presiding officer. So I make that commitment here and now. We will bring forward a statement, and I'll bring forward a revised business motion, subject of course to the agreement of Bureau next week.
Thank you. The question is that motion 18921 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of business motion 18922 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on timetabling of a bill at stage 1. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press their request to speak button now, and I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion, therefore. The question is that motion 18922 be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau motion 18923 on committee remits. And I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. There are 2 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is that motion 18883, in the name of Angela Constance, on Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill at Stage 3 be agreed. And as this is a motion to pass the bill, the question must be decided by division, so there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system.